It's 5 o'clock. We'll call the Portage County Board to order. Roll call.
All right. We have 6 supervisors attending from home. Supervisors Johnson, Zastro, Mula,
Hanel, Robbie, and Pataki. 2 supervisors are excused, Barry Jakowski and Supervisor Martinson. All remaining supervisors are present. Can't hear.
Next is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Now they can't hear. You guys can't hear?
Just come a little closer.
Yeah, you're a little closer, yeah.
I don't know. Can you hear me from here? Okay. All right. He's going to turn the house sound down a little bit.
Have everybody connected via WebEx mute their microphones, please?
If not, Lee will do it. He's coming back. We're really giving him a workout tonight. He's getting his steps in.
Did you guys hear me with attendance, or would you like me to repeat that? Repeat it? Okay. So we have 6 supervisors attending remotely. Supervisors Johnson, Zastro, Mua, Hanel, Robbie, and Pataki. We have 2 excused, Supervisor Barry Jakowski and Supervisor Martinson. All other members are in attendance in person.
Next item is pledge. Next item is Pledge Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Invocation by Supervisor Barry Jakowski, and Barry is not in attendance. Have to make hay when the sun's shining, and the sun is shining, and he's making hay. So I'm going to fill in. If you don't, if not all of you don't already know, Dale O'Brien passed away on May 25th, 2020, leaving his wife of 33 years. Dale served as a county supervisor for 14 years and a town of Plover supervisor for 17. He received a degree in agriculture at UW-Madison and worked at Hilmersky Farms in Plover. Dale loved to laugh, and I always enjoyed making him laugh. He had one of those real laughs. You could tell he meant it. I grew up only 2 houses down from Dale on Washington Avenue in Plover. It's a small world. He will be missed by me and many, many others. Could I ask for a moment of silence in Dale's name? Rest well, my friend. Amen. Thank you. And as Kayla had stated before, all of the mics should be hot now. Lee and Kayla worked on that to try and make sure so the supervisors don't need to get up to go to the podiums. But I ask that for the people at home, that you please try and use the mic, and if not, I'll try and catch you to remind you. So review and approval of April 28th, 2020 amended county board minutes. We'll take these separate. Moved by Supervisor Moresi, seconded by Supervisor Matt Jakowski. Any discussion? All those in favor with those minutes, say aye.
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 Opposed? Opposed? Minutes carried. Minutes of May 19th, 2020 County Board 4. Motion by Supervisor Laddick, second by Supervisor Dubek. Any discussion? All those in favor with those minutes, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes carried. Correspondence.
Just as a quick reminder, when we send out the packet, once you receive your packet for the meeting, if you could just call us and let us know in the county clerk's office if you plan to attend the meeting remotely. It's very helpful for us to keep track of attendance purposes and make sure that if someone is attending remotely, we, are watching for them to sign on, or if they're just absent or excused. So just as a reminder, thank you.
Presentation, these were presentations that we originally had on back at the end of March. And this is the last group to get caught up. So we have Tracy Arnold and Patty Benedict, Introduction 2020 Land and Water Conservation Awareness Speaking Contest. Principal participants, Annika Waltenberg, Where Have All the Flowers Gone?
And I work.
Patty, can you use the mic,
use the
please,
mic.
for the people at home? Thank you.
I work in the Planning and Zoning Department, Land and Water Conservation Division. We have been doing the poster and speaking contests. We kind of revived them back in 2010. And we've had participation kind of going up and down a little bit. I just want to point out the posters this year. These are the ones on the right are the second and third place posters, and the ones on the far left are the first place posters that we've had. Out of those posters, they took first place in the Portage County contest. They took first place in the area contest, which is a 9-county area. And then they went to state. This year we had one poster that took second place at state. In the past, we've had 6 posters that have gone on to the national contest. And in 2016, we had a national winner. So that's pretty impressive. We got some pretty good kids that are and artists that are taking part in these contests. I'm going to let Tracy introduce herself.
I'm Tracy Arnold. New to Portage County. I've been here for just over a year. Not new to conservation. I came from Wood County and I was there for about 12 years. So I bailed and crossed the border and nobody's caught me yet, so I'm staying.
So this is the Benedict Arnold show. So I'm going to introduce Annika Waltenberg has been doing speeches in our speech contest since 2015 when she was a 5th grader. This year, as a 10th grader, she placed first in Portage County contest, area contest, and she did take first at the state contest, which takes place at the Wisconsin Land and Water Conservation Association annual conference in March. So as the first place speaker, she got to present her speech, Where Have All the Flowers Gone?, in front of almost 400 people that were in attendance at this conference. So without further ado, we will listen to Annika's speech.
Sound.
Uh-oh. same one. Yeah, so I'll try it. You want to move to the presentation first?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask if you wanted to move on, then we can figure out this part if you wanted to move on.
You can always post it somewhere else too.
Yeah, we'll try to get the sound working.
Yeah, you can put both of you anyway again, so the next part is, land and water conservation outreach and youth education program.
Right. The Land and Water Conservation Office has several youth education programs that we are promoting with our youth in the Portage County area. So one of the things we do is we have Stewardship Week, and we have on our website, there are materials for grades K through, I think it's 8. And we send out reminders to and notices to all the teachers in the county. And they can have access to these free downloadable materials. Stewardship Week usually takes place the last week of April, first part of May. We also budget money for conservation camp scholarships. Obviously, this year, camps have been canceled, but since 2008, we have had 16 scholarships that have been awarded to campers. They really enjoy the camp. There's 2 camps. One is, I'll let Tracy explain the camps. She's much better at that because she's actually one of the counselors. As far as the speaking contest, since 2010, we've had 16 speakers. The number of posters that we've had since 2010 is 426 posters that have been submitted. And about half of those were this year, and that's due to Tracy's presentations within the classrooms. And with that, I'm going to go on, let Tracy do her presentation.
All right, you can go ahead and click to the next slide, please. So this is our speech contest. We'll try to get that speech posted on the website or some other way because it's a really good speech, about a 5-minute speech. So Annika did a really good job. Standing up in front of 450 people, all adults, and you're in high school is not an easy thing to do, and she nailed it. So we were very well represented. Okay, go ahead. Keep clicking. These were all the posters that we had turned in this year. We spread them all out for our committee. There were some really good posters to choose from. Except Patty said the winners are over here. Go ahead and click. This giant bee in the pictures is why we got so many posters, I think. We offered to go to classrooms, and Jen McNelly made me a giant bee costume. So when you dress up like a giant bee, kids tend to like that stuff. So we got a lot of posters. We almost didn't know what to do with that many this year, but we got it. Okay, go ahead and click. This is the theme for next year. Healthy forests, healthy communities. So if you have kids, grandkids, neighbors, let us know. We will try to reach out to them. We're planning on doing some more presentations. I'm not sure what costume I'm going to come up with this year, but we'll come up with something. Okay, go ahead and click. This is another one of our programs. We're working with Farmers in Mill Creek. Ken from Extensions helped too. This is more for like the high school kids. And we are talking about cover crops, the importance of it, erosion, things like that. So we're trying to get a diverse audience, but this one happens to be for the high school kids. This one was in, obviously it was in I think it was January. And one of the high school kids came in Crocs with the holes in them out to the field. And we were like, so she put the mittens over the tops of them. Lesson learned. Okay, next slide, please. This was one of our programs that really took off. We started this probably 4 years ago, and we've kind of been right around the 100 student mark. With this program, what we wanted to do was we wanted to do a presentation about the importance of prairies, pollinators, different prairies around Wisconsin, and then social media took off this year, and we got over 600 kids. The best thing about this program is that each kid gets to plant a pollinator plug at their school. If they don't have it at their school, then they're able to take it home. We've had a lot of people help us with the prairie plugs. Ann Graham, Paul Skowinski, both of them has helped us. We usually start the seeds in January. So we started them in January. we had probably 3,000 plants started, and then surprise March happened and all the schools got closed. So now we had 3,000 prairie plants, and we were like, what do we do with them? Cool plan B. There's a couple farmers around that said that they would do pollinator pledges, and we could take pieces of the ground that they don't use anymore, and we could plant our plants there. So now there's different pollinator pledges patches around the county, which I thought was a pretty cool plan B. Okay, go ahead. This is just some of the pictures of us out in the classrooms. Dan O'Connell and I tag team this pretty well. It's pretty entertaining. If you want to see it, let us know. It's pretty entertaining. Okay, go ahead. This is another with the farmers in Mill Creek. John Aaron, I'm sure a lot of you have either know him or the name. He came up with this idea to have 3 and 4-year-olds out at the farm, and we were going to talk about cover crops, and we all looked at him like, what? Literally 3 and 4-year-olds were out there, and we were like, okay, let's do this. So Ken started digging up worms. They thought it was the greatest thing on earth. Farm Cat runs through the middle of the lesson. They thought it was great. I was talking about pollinators. And luckily they have a sunflower patch out there too. So we literally walk the kids right through the sunflower patch. Not many people get to do that anymore. So the fact that they could go walking back on a farm, it turned into a pretty good day. Okay, go ahead. Any questions for us?
Bob Gifford?
I don't have a question. I just have an extreme commendation for all the work you've done. I've only worked with you for a year on land and water conservation, but I think that the work that Portage County is doing with youth education and bringing in youngsters from 3 to 6 years old into this, it's a model for the whole state. It's a model for the nation. I mean, you had 400 some students involved, right?
Yep.
And the work that John Aaron has done, and he's invested thousands of dollars of his time and resources, and just totally devoted to these kids. So yeah, it's not a question. It's just like praise, ultimate praise.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for your work.
Yep, thank you.
Anybody else? I can't see if there's anybody else
We'll
over.
move those.
No, okay. The only comment I have is if you're looking for a costume next year, go as a dinosaur. Kids like dinosaurs.
All right, I'll see what Jen can do.
And I just last weekend I introduced my grandsons 2 and 4 to angleworms, and the 4-year-old thought they were really something, but the 2-year-old didn't want nothing to do with them. It's too early yet. So.
We'll get them. We'll get them.
So if there's no other questions, yeah, I think we're gonna try and upload that onto the web, onto our site here later. We're having difficulty. We're still working through some of the bugs of this new technology and things, and getting the mic set up. So it'll be one of our things on the checklist to work on in the future. So if I apologize.
I apologize. All right.
So-
There's more than one way to do it.
Yeah. Okay. If there's no other questions, thank you. A round of applause, please, for. Ladies. Next, Health and Human Services Director, Ray Shabilsky. COVID-19 update.
Good afternoon. Good to see you all again. When I was here last month, I think I said that even though the Supreme Court had ordered the end to safer at home, the virus hadn't gone away. Well, those words are very true. So today in Portage County, we have we've identified 82 positive cases. Out of that, in addition, we have just south of 3,500 negative cases. We also have 43 recovered cases at this time. So the virus is here. We've been really, really busy. On the 4th of June, we had 20 positive cases in our community. Memorial Day weekend wasn't very kind to us. We had graduation parties, we had people crowding in bars, and it led to the outbreak that we had to deal with. With that being said, because of that uptick, we asked for assistance from the state and the National Guard to do a second what's referred to as wing testing or Wisconsin National Guard testing here. That took place last week on Wednesday, and we originally had ordered 300 tests because in working with the Guard and what our first wing testing, we tested 348 people in 2 days. So we thought 300 was a pretty good goal. By 11:30 on our first day, we realized that 300 tests weren't going to make it through the day. So with assistance from emergency management and our sheriff's office, we ordered more tests. And they ran down, I'm not saying at what speed, but they got here quite quickly and returned with 700 more tests. We went through 600 tests on the first day, and we went through 400 additional tests the second day. So we tested 1,000 people, and there was a few tests that got rejected. So officially, we tested 997 people in 2 days here in Portage County. Out of that testing, we have had 6 positive tests. 3 of those tests belong to individuals who don't live in Portage County because, again, remember, wing testing given by the state, you don't have to be a county resident to get there. And 3 are Portage County residents. That's an amazingly low number. I mean, we certainly anticipated a much higher positive count out of that testing than what we're seeing. There's still 50 tests in staging, so we're still waiting on 50 test results. But that's still an amazing low number for us, and we're really happy with that. So with that being said, I certainly, again, want to thank everybody that was involved with that. My staff, obviously, who did yeoman's work, but the sheriff's office for what they did, Stevens Point PD, our highway department that helped us out, our facilities department, and emergency management. We couldn't have pulled that off without them. So that was truly a great thing. So you may have heard that we've had the need, and we have brought on additional contact tracers because my staff is simply just to the point of overwhelm. We are running 7 days a week with our contact tracing. Monday, 7 days a week, 8 hours a day or more, we're doing that work. So we hired 5 additional contact tracers that are on board. We have also worked with the ADRC to bring back 10 of their staff that are on furlough or partial furlough. They will be starting shortly, and then 2 additional staff at HHS that are being furloughed are going to start as contact tracers as well. So that work is there. It's just not dealing with the positives. There's lots of work that needs to be entered into the system for our negative cases as well. So we're extremely busy. And speaking of contact tracing, people have asked the question, well, what does it mean? What does it mean that I'm a close contact? What does that mean? And so, to answer that question, CDC just came out with I guess, newer guidance. It's very similar to what they had. But basically, you're a close contact if you've had direct physical contact with a person who's been positive. Hugging, kissing, handshaking, those type of things. If you stayed overnight or had an overnight guest in your house that was positive, you're considered a close contact. If you've had any contact with with any person's respiratory secretions, so they've coughed on you, they sneezed on you, you picked up their Kleenex, you shared a glass, you shared something, you would be considered a close contact. And if you were within 6 feet and not practicing safe social distancing for more than 15 minutes, even if you're wearing a mask, you will be considered a close contact. So we continue to preach, and we will continue to preach what you need to do. Washing your hands for 20 seconds with soap and water, covering your coughs and sneeze in public, avoiding touching, staying at home when you're sick. Practicing physical distancing of 6 feet or greater, avoid large gatherings, avoid leaving your community if at all possible, and wearing a cloth face mask covering in situations where physical distancing isn't possible. So that's kind of the update. Chris, did you want to add anything yet? Yeah, if you have questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Supervisor Bob Gifford.
Yeah, hi, Ray. It's not so much a question as a comment. As you know, I keep bringing to the Health and Human Services Board the concerns that I get from people calling me and other elected officials, politically active people in the community do not feel that the county is doing enough on this. And I just, it makes me feel like I'm doing a crappy job as in local government. But honestly, I mean, given that the Supreme Court delivered the smackdown on the stay-at-home order, I don't know what else we can do without running into more Supreme Court activity. You know what I'm saying? So I appreciate the fact that I've been able to call you and get a reply back even on a Sunday, right? Which not many staff people work on a Sunday. But I mean, it's unprecedented. We've never been through anything like this. So hopefully we all learn from this and we all learn to navigate the next event that comes along. I'm sure this won't be the last one. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Supervisor Dubek.
At the beginning, we were listing area businesses where people were at present or an employee was tested positive for COVID-19. We're not doing it anymore. Can you comment on that, please?
Sure. So, you know, when we had our first outbreak, because we could tie it to a very small number of businesses, you know, we were listing where those businesses were out, and people have inquired, and we've had open records requests in regards to that information. You know, currently, what we're trying to get people to understand is that, you know, we have community spread. And people says, well, what is community spread? Well, that means that people have been infected with the virus in an area, including some who are not sure where they became infected. So our message now is we could publish this list, and I've had conversations just today with the county executive in regards to that. But truly publishing this list, we feel, is going to give people a false sense of security. As long as I avoid those places on the list, I'm okay. And that's simply not true. You simply have to believe and assume that wherever you go, if you're not taking these precautions, you are at risk. And I know a lot of people have said, well, I would, you know, I'll feel better if I can read this list. Okay, you're going to avoid those places. But if you go somewhere else, there is no guarantee that you're not going to be exposed. That's where we're at in the virus at this time. So we truly want to be able to have people to go with that mindset of saying, how do I keep myself no matter where I go? What can I do? How can I best avoid that? And truly, you know, as I just mentioned, avoid those social gatherings, avoid travel, do those type of things. You know, people have talked to us about, well, you know, why isn't, you know, this place on there? And I know somebody positive must have been at, you know, Fleet Farm or just wherever. And the bottom line is that, again, you have to have that 15 minutes of contact. And that's what makes, you know, various places at a higher risk, obviously. If you're sitting down in a restaurant or you happen to be at a local watering hole, you know, chances are you're probably going to be within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. So that conversation is ongoing, Chris. And I know that, you know, as I said, we talked with Chris and Dave, and I are having conversations about that. As well as we're, you know, probably going to reach out to Todd Kukan at the Business Council.
Supervisor Ande.
Thank you. Two comments, I guess, and a question. I was impressed by the fact that, in fact, somewhat surprised that locations that had positive cases were not in a big boxes areas, but mostly in pubs and eateries and different places like that. And I want to comment to thank you for doing such a good job, because your preaching must be getting through on those big box areas not to do it. The question that I have is that when you find a hot spot, who has the authority to shut that sucker down right then and there instead of waiting 2 or 3 days?
So if we determine that there is, you know, and this is going back to Chapter 252 of the statutes, that has to do with the health officer's authority to basically deal with, you know, infectious diseases and things like that. The health officer, you know, we're going to work with those businesses, you know, and again, if we think that there's an outbreak, we're going to work with them to say, look, you got to do something about this. You're going to have to clean, you're going to have to, you know, you're going to get staff tested and those type of things. We have not yet issued an order to close to any particular businesses. We've had businesses work with us and do that on their own. They absolutely have. We've found out that businesses have closed before we even knew they had a positive case.
Yeah.
We didn't even know they had a positive case, and all of a sudden we got people calling us going, I read on social media that this business is closed and this business is closed. What's going on? I'm going, we didn't know. So I think they're doing a good job. I mean, businesses want to succeed, and they're going to do what they need to do as well. So.
Thank you.
And just to follow up with that, make sure everybody understands that if they decide that there's something, all the employees get tested, Ray, and then there's until the results get back, they stay closed and they do a thorough cleaning at that facility as well, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to clarify or make sure everybody understood that. Supervisor Dodge.
So then does public health do an inspection before they reopen, or is it just on their honor that they've done the cleaning?
It's just on their honor. We're not going out and doing that inspection.
Ray, you guys have all kinds of recommendations though that they could follow and cleaning supplies and everything else, and you're there to assist in as many ways as you can.
Yep, and our environmental health staff, I mean, if they have questions or saying, you know, what do I need to use? What, you know, is this cleaning solution okay? You know, we were going to guide them through all of that.
Supervisor Moresi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Director Shabilsky, for entertaining my phone calls and emails and answering tons of questions for all of us. I really
even in the spider controversy.
even in the spider controversy. My question is has there been any consideration immediately or directly to our county operations about a mask policy? My concern is, you know, Health and Human Services in particular, you have lots of people coming in and out all the time. Some of the other buildings are closed, but what are we doing to mitigate or limit exposure and make people, I guess, wear masks mandatorily unless their, you know, doctor says they shouldn't for some reason for staff and our buildings and facilities?
Well, the simple answer to your question is yes, that is it under consideration. You want to add anything to that, Kristen? Because we are having those conversations as we speak. You know, you have to remember that, you know, for a lot of our departments where they don't have a lot of public traffic, they have plexiglass too in place, and that barrier is something that obviously you can put in place to help stop the spread. But
6 feet, get on my way.
Yeah,
Chair Haga?
that conversation's been ongoing for a few weeks. There's a lot of different factors. We have the plexiglass barriers for interaction with the public in all departments now. There was a couple that didn't have it, and that's been remedied. In terms of masks, especially early on, there were concerns about availability, what was on the market, and then also explaining to staff that, you know, the masks, I mean, right now, if anybody wants to wear a mask when they come to work, they're more than willing to. We have volunteers who sew masks. We have masks available for anybody who wants them. We've made them available to any department on a regular basis. So that's happening right now. The scenario that initially unfolded was we needed to get masks for the healthcare center as a priority. So we ordered 25,000 masks for that. And just so you know, that's, you know, roughly 9 to 10 weeks of mask use for them, because in a normal flu season, they would be using approximately 2,500 per week. And so that we had as a reserve, because, you know, they've been doing a wonderful job. There are other streams of PPE coming in through the state, and the state's really picked up lately on that as well and been meeting demands that department heads also put out through the EOC to say, here's what I want, here's what I need. And then we issue that order, the state delivers, and then that's distributed across the county. Most recently, the courts have had a kind of soft opening, I guess you would call it. And the state's assessment said for a 12-week period, they would need 36,000 masks. And then they allotted them 6,000 and said the county's on the hook for the rest. And so we're identifying, can we, you know, what's the timeline? What's the availability for different masks? Is it a surgical mask? Is it a KN95, which isn't an N95? though there's a lot of confusion on that because obviously they sound very similar. But that being said, when Milwaukee County put out their mask policy, we got our hands on their language to see how are they navigating some of the ins and outs, because even for the courts, there's dilemmas where if someone's coming in for a constitutional right in terms of a court appearance, and if they refuse to wear a mask, what then happens, right? And so there's been conversations with corp council organizations and the statewide calls about where are the lines in terms of making it mandatory. And so you see, I think in the Milwaukee policy too, that they sort of have this loose mandate, but they're also acknowledging that there are instances where people aren't going to wear them. So our conversation is focused on, do we have the masks? What are we going to need for a reopening of the county if we were to say open up the buildings and have the public coming in a way different than they are now? And public coming in through HHS, if you're doing close contact work there, people are wearing PPE. So that's happening already. Anybody who's doing close contact with anyone in the county has PPE, they're wearing PPE, so that's being addressed. And then the conversation we've been having, we're having another meeting tomorrow on that, and that's just kind of taking all the pieces from different parts of the state, seeing how people are working through the legal ins and outs of it, and then figuring out what can we purchase, when will it get here, and then how does that dovetail into an overall plan in terms of, you know, if you implement a policy, you want all these things in place, and you don't want to touch the reserve for the healthcare center, and we're going to have to come up with some masks for the courts, and then we got to make sure that we're the capability to maintain supply for those two at a minimum, because you've got the Constitution here, vulnerable population there, and you don't want kind of lower risk kind of general services at the county to be competing for masks in that sense. So that's been a topic of discussion, will continue to be, and once we have kind of a picture that works for us, then we'll be able to implement something.
Mr. Chairman?
Stan, can you hold on? Joan Honnell would like to speak.
That's what I was just going to tell you that. I can see your hand going up.
Yep, thank you. We're unmuting Joan now. Joan Honnell, you'd like to speak?
I have a question for Ray.
Okay.
Ray, I understand that our Portage County nursing home continues to be free of cases, but what about all the assisted living places in Stevens Point, Portage County? How are they faring? Thank you.
So that's a good question, Joan. You know, the state has a goal of testing every nursing home and then expanding that to every assisted living facility. We're in contact. I believe that just this afternoon there's a suspect positive at one of them, but for the most part, our assisted living places are in pretty good shape. I think, again, there's no visitation that they're allowing in those facilities. I realize that's difficult on the residents, difficult on the family members. But, you know, right now we're in pretty good shape, but the state was still trying to coordinate all of that testing for each and every one of those facilities. And I believe it's their goal is to actually have ongoing testing in that facilities as well.
Supervisor Pataki, did you have a question, or you're just trying to help me?
I'm just trying to help you. I think Jerry Zastro also had a question.
Supervisor Zastro?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do. Director Shabilsky, I want to thank you and your staff. I know under less strenuous circumstances, you and your staff always do an incredible job. And I don't have a question. I think all of the previous questions have been really good and kind of covered anything I would have asked. But I want to commend you and your staff for doing a wonderful job, and especially on overload here. So if you would pass that on, I think we all wish to thank you greatly, and keep up the good work. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and I will do that.
Any other questions? Supervisor Neville?
I had a question about a room such as what we're in, where air is being recirculated, and we have maybe half the people wearing masks and half not wearing masks. What does the CDC or what do the guidance have to say about the safety of that and the length of time that a meeting might last?
Well, I'm not going to be giving you an answer on the length of time. I just don't have that off the top of my head. I certainly can get you the answer though, Supervisor Neville. But again, you know, the concern that we have is droplets in the air. You know, droplets, you know, they're saying, and that's why the 6 feet, you know, if you're greater than 6 feet, droplets really don't go there, then they're going to be on a surface. How long they live on a surface, that's changed dramatically since the start of this. You know, at first we were told that droplets can live on surfaces for, you know, 5 days or 6 days, and depending on the surface, and that just constantly changes. So, you know, again, you know, the mask for people, you know, that protects me, or that protects you from me. This doesn't do anything for me taking in droplets. So I can get you some information back though if you'd like.
Sure. Don't make it a priority over more important things you're doing. But yes, I'm interested in that. And the other thing, like if somebody stays in your house overnight, they're not talking and everything, but they're still breathing, and it goes into the air system, even though it may not be these droplets. And I know that some of the research, because I've seen photos of it, show that droplets can go like, what, 15 feet from you. So
I'm sure that if I sneeze, they go at least that far, if you've ever heard me sneeze. But again, you know, if you're having somebody that's a non-family member stay overnight, that's going to be a risk. Obviously, if they're not positive, you know, no other risk than normal. But you know, you would be considered a close contact if you did that, if they were positive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Soik. Supervisor Soik.
Thank you. Out of the 82 confirmed cases, how many were traced back to out of town contact?
I don't have that answer. You know, I can go back and look for that. That's you know, right now, you know, I would say the vast majority, you know, they were here, and you know, did somebody come in from out of town that brought the virus that you know possibly triggered part of that outbreak? Absolutely, and we're aware of one. So.
Okay, but we don't have those numbers.
I don't have those numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Supervisor Morassi.
Thank you. Just one more follow-up question. There was a Black Lives Matter rally last weekend, or 2 weekends ago, and there was one person who tested positive there. But then the tests came, and that was about 2-3 days after the rally. Is there another testing period that's going to come up here where, or do you see it as a concern that there could be potential spread as a hotspot there as well?
Well, and I think, you know, really what you're getting at is, you know, because a number of the people that were at the rally, you know, attended our wing testing. But really the question is, did they have the viral load,
correct,
you know, to test positive? You know, typically I will tell you that, you know, it's probably optimal that, you know, you're out 5 or 6 days from exposure to have that optimal viral load. You know, and our original response was to the outbreak that we just had in our community. You know, when we found out that the rally had a positive case, it obviously gave us a big influx of people to get tested. So we are planning to have that at this point, but, you know, right now we're almost 2 weeks out from that rally. It'll be 2 weeks on Sunday.
Yeah.
You know, that's that optimal period, that 14 days. So if we would see a huge uptick over the next 2 or 3 days, we would consider doing that again. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know it's hard to kind of track those folks who are sitting here virtually.
He's doing a good job.
Yeah, and that's why I messaged him. So I appreciate that. So 2 questions. First question is, if tomorrow I would stop at Health and Human Services Director, would I see a majority of your staff that are in close proximity with one another? Would they be wearing masks? And then this isn't so much a question as a comment. I think having information is not a false sense of security. I think having information is having information. What we do with it, that's the next thing. So I think it's important to have the information. For instance, I did see the list of businesses that had either positive COVID as employees or visitors, customers. That doesn't give me a false sense of security. What it does tell me is if I would choose to go to one of those, I would probably stop and ask a question, since now we're learning you don't follow up with an inspection. I would probably ask the business owner, what have you done? How can I feel safe? What have you done now to mitigate that in the future? So I don't think it's a false sense of security. I think information is power. I've always felt that way, and I tend to disagree with your assumption there. But I would love to hear about the face mask wearing at Health and Human Services as models for the county.
So if you would come into Health and Human Services and my staff is not being able to practice the 6 feet or has the ability to practice 6 feet, you will see people wearing masks. If you see anyone that is dealing with the public, they will be wearing a mask. We are fortunate, even though it's an aging building, not as old as the courthouse, I realize, but most of our staff are in a situation where their offices, even their cubicles, are providing very adequate, more than 6 feet of safe social distancing. So when they're at their desk, no, you're not going to see that. But if they're meeting with other staff, meeting with clients, and they can't do the 6 feet, they absolutely will be wearing a mask.
Supervisor Moore.
Thank you. Ray, I also want to thank you and all your staff for all the work that you all have done and really getting the information out to us quick enough in our community so that we're aware. My question to you is, I know that many communities such as Milwaukee and the city of Minneapolis have ordinances in place requiring folks to wear masks to every business and requiring folks to wear masks in public. Is that something you see that Portage County could possibly implement as a way to stop this widespread of COVID that's been happening the last week?
Well, it certainly is something that we're having conversations about, Supervisor Mua. In fact, just before I came down here, we were having this very conversation. One of the things that we because there's lots of different sides to this argument, if you want to look at it that way. One of the things we talk about is, if you would require that, how do you enforce it? I think and that question would have to be answered about enforceability. I don't think that the public health officer is going to run around with a ticket book or law enforcement for everybody that doesn't wear a mask. The other thing that I do want to point out is that even though, as you mentioned, those are in some bigger cities that they have that, our recommendation is no more than 50 people at a gathering, outside, inside, and with safe social distancing if you're inside and out. The city of Milwaukee is 250. So each community is making their own determination as to what they feel is the right thing to do. But we are certainly, looking at this mask issue, at least on a wide basis, I shouldn't say every day, but it is something that we're dealing with currently.
Thank you.
Lee, is there anybody else?
Not that I see.
No. Anybody else in the public? Lee, Ray, has any of the people that have, since the start of this, have we had any of them hospitalized?
Initially, we had 2 people that were hospitalized, but those were like in our first 5. We just had a person that was hospitalized, but the person was actually in the hospital when they got diagnosed. So they were already admitted, they got diagnosed. They have been released from the hospital, however. Okay. So currently, we don't.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I've always said Ray's number one. I don't want to hear from anybody else that giving me a tough time, but he's got his hands full, and I always think he's always wrestling a tornado. Him and his staff, they do a wonderful job, and we're lucky to have them. So thanks to Ray and everybody that's working on this. It's consuming a lot of time. There's a lot that's involved in it that we don't see. So, and that means answering people's phone calls or emails on Sundays. Mm-hmm. So thank you. Ray.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Ray.
Members of the public who wish to address the county board on specific agenda items must register their requests at this time, with such comments subject to reasonable control of county board chair as set forth in Robert's Rules of Order. Anybody from the public, please step up to the podium and state your name. Just state your name and then we'll call on you later when we get, and which item it is.
Jesse Haney and item 1.
Thank you.
Greg Wright, also item 1.
Ben Sheets, item 1.
Katrina Shankland, item 1.
Anybody else from the public?
Anybody in the overflow?
No. All right, and remind everybody that they'll be allotted 3 minutes for their comment. Confirmation of county executives, reappointments and appointments, and if there's no objections, I'll take them all in one. Motion by Supervisor Moresi, seconded by Supervisor Splinter. Discussion, Supervisor Moresi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question for process, for my own edification. How do the citizens get appointed, and what is the application process, and how is it noticed? Because I've had people express interest in, they want to serve, but I don't know what answer to give them or where to find it on the website.
Chris.
Thank you in advance too.
Is there a specific one you're curious about, or just in general? Because there's some variables.
Just in general, I mean, I see that we have appointments that show up, and there's people that leave, and then new people that show up. And I understand that sometimes it's just the alternate that kind of steps into the role. But you know, if somebody new wants to be involved, do they call your office direct? Is there a posting online that says, here's an application?
Yep, there's an application. If people have interest, they can, we communicate with them, get them to fill out the paperwork, and that's essentially it. To be honest, most of the time it's hard to find people to serve. And so what you end up doing is, say somebody's stepping down, people will find their own replacement kind of thing, or through the grapevine, or some areas like parks. I've got a list of people who want on parks. So you're like, well, okay, but those terms are 7-year terms. But then you also have Board of Adjustment. Now that one is very different. Typically, because it deals with the outline areas, and the city and the village have their own planning and zoning, and it doesn't really apply to them. That you're looking for people who have experience in planning and zoning or something, along those lines. It's not a requirement, but in my mind, it would be very, very helpful considering the role that they play. And then what I do for that one is I put out a call to municipalities, to P&Z commissions across the county. Does anybody have people who are interested in stepping up? And that's worked well for that. There's been some people who've shuffled around for one reason or another, but we've managed to keep the people who are there going this time around. Well, there's also weird staggering terms with some of this, and so even though somebody's term is technically up, sometimes they're still replaced midterm. There's a lot of goofy things with some of the terms, but yeah, anybody who's interested in serving in any citizen capacity can reach out to my office, the county clerk's office. There's an application form. They can say, I'm interested in all of these. And we maintain that and keep an open line of communication with those people so that when a spot opens up, we contact them and get them going.
Is it publicly posted as well? Like, is it on the website anywhere? Is there an easy way to find it?
Well, the application, I don't know off the top of my head. I think what we've used so far, most of the time people have found their own replacement on this one, and people haven't contacted us. We have posted in the past in the papers, put it online. We put out again through municipal meetings, same thing, like let your people know if there's an interest in this, or if they have an interest in this. So yeah, there are those processes in play. If I'll double check on where it is on the website, but typically speaking, the people most people who are interested self-identify, and then the ones who don't self-identify, we beat the bushes looking for everybody and try to get somebody. And there's not, that's kind of the one or the other with a lot of these positions.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Supervisor Neville, did you have your hand up?
I did, but I think the point was answered, which was, it seems to me we should have something on the website where, just give people a direction as to what to do if they're interested. Thank you.
Anybody online, Lee, have anything? No. We've got a motion and a second for the reappointments and the appointments. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor with aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Resolution number 1, resolution to create a diversity affairs and inclusivity committee, inclusiveness committee. Motion by Supervisor Moresi.
Johnson's got her hand up.
Seconded by Supervisor Moore. Discussion. We will go to the folks in the, Jesse Haney.
I'm gonna take this off to try to speak. I don't think I can do that. I wrote down what I wanted to say. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for all the work you do on behalf of our community. I'm here to voice my strong support for the proposal to create a standalone diversity affairs and inclusiveness committee. I attended the executive committee meeting a couple of weeks ago as well. It was, for the most part, an incredibly positive meeting. Community members and county board members all spoke or wrote in unanimous support of the resolution and in favor of it being created as a standalone committee. The most powerful moment was when the sheriff and chiefs of 4 area police departments stood up and together voiced their strong support for the creation of this committee. They welcomed it. I was reminded that even my initial comments to the executive committee had been too focused on preventing potential problems within our criminal justice system, given the national attention on that right now. When really, law enforcement often comes at the end of a very long line of injustices for minority groups. Our current reality in our country and in our county is not fair for people of color or for police. If we're going to begin to change for the better, we need to focus on strategies that can identify and remove the burden of systemic racism within realms like education, healthcare, housing, finance, and so many other areas. So much of this work can and should be addressed at the county level with leadership and full support from this board. This brings me to the reason I felt the need to attend this meeting and speak again. During the last 2 minutes of the meeting, something unfortunate happened. The chair of the committee suggested striking a whereas statement from the resolution because he insisted, in his words, it is a statement of opinion. The 3 other white board members present agreed it was opinion and voted to remove it. The 1 non-white board member disagreed and voted no, meaning it was officially removed, and the resolution before the board tonight is the amended version. Here's the statement that was removed. Whereas these gaps mean that discrimination and exclusion, both in explicit and implicit ways, occurs, with some discrimination resulting in violence and intimidation by members of our community. This statement is so clear and so benign, not placing blame for violence on police or anyone else, simply acknowledging that even though we have, as a community, tried various things to improve the situation, gaps still exist that sometimes result in violence and intimidation. That statement should not have been removed. It is not opinion, it is a fact. To remove that statement, it provides the important reason why do we need this committee. To remove that statement and brush it off as opinion demonstrates a lack of understanding and awareness of the experience of so many people in our community. The fact that it was the chair and 2 vice chairs of this committee that took this action, the very same people who I understand will be charged with approving the details for how this committee is structured and who serves, makes me extremely apprehensive about whether it will have real support and respect from the full board once it is formed. So I'm here today to request that the chair and vice chairs of the board work together to reintroduce the whereas language they removed and vocally support its return to the official resolution as part of the full board vote. If you continue to feel strongly that this is a statement of opinion and don't want to reintroduce it, I ask that you please take a few minutes to better explain to the full board and community members present your justification for calling that statement an opinion and for having it removed. I promise to really listen and do my best to understand if I can. My hope is that the statement can be returned as quickly and easily as it was removed, and the real work of the committee can commence right away and on the right foot. Thank you for listening.
Greg Wright.
Greg Wright, District 1. I really appreciate the example of COVID-19 at the same time that we're taking up this particular issue, as I think we're seeing why government exists and how it works in its best fashion. As Director Shabilsky just came up here, started off the conversation with data that they're tracking, and then research that they're trying to understand in response to that data so that you all can make the most informed choice to make sure that the outcomes that happen in our community are the best possible outcomes for people, again, based on data that's being tracked and based on the best available research that's out there. We get caught up very often in a very emotional conversation about oppression and racism. These are very, very charged words, but the role of government is to try to remove some of that emotional chargedness and instead dig into the data, dig into the research, and understand again how to best serve all constituents in our community through the best possible policies that you all can enact. We know that, as Jesse just said, we know that this is a real problem. This is not something that is debated anymore in our country. Racism is present. It's been studied. It is in Wisconsin currently being declared a public health crisis by the Public Health Association of Wisconsin. And so we know that these are real problems. The job of government is to start to analyze the data behind that to make sure we have accurate data about what's happening in our community specifically, to analyze the research that goes along with that data in our community, and then again to make sure that we're evaluating our policy to ensure that we are not unintentionally or intentionally harming protected groups in our community. And so I strongly encourage you to, again, restate the amendment that was taken out, or the whereas statement that was taken out. I strongly encourage you to make this a standalone committee. This is vital work. This is the role of government. It is our job to fix the policies that are harming individuals in our community. Thank you.
Ben Sheets.
Ben Sheets, lead pastor at Good Shepherd Lutheran Church in Plover, Wisconsin, as well as resident in Plover. I stand before you today. Again, I was present virtually at the Exec Ops meeting a few weeks ago in support of the standalone Diversity Affairs and Inclusiveness Committee. As the lead pastor at Good Shepherd, I work with members of our community to ensure that our governance has representation by various groups within our congregation. In this way, all participate in the visioning, accountability, and implementation of our shared ministries. This diversity of voice and shared influence is something that we value and hold dear. The creation of a Diversity Affairs and Inclusiveness Committee within the structure of our county government not only serves to give public affirmation to the voice of the marginalized within our community, it also gives these voices influence within the structure itself. This influence will help to shape our local government and hopefully our larger community to tend to the needs and concerns of our underrepresented neighbors. Raising up these voices and these leaders within our community is critical for Portage County to continue to be a life-giving place where all will feel welcomed and affirmed. Tomorrow, the denomination that Good Shepherd is a part of, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, will commemorate 9 Black brothers and sisters in faith from Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church who were killed 5 years ago after a Bible study with a member from the ELCA. This young man walked into their Bible study, sat with them for an hour, and then decided that he was going to kill them in order to incite a race war. The ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, is the whitest denomination in the United States. We have failed as a church to raise up leaders in a diverse and inclusive community so that this young man can come through our ministries and hear the good news of our faith and still see people of color as an enemy and those to be slaughtered, to deny their humanity.
Tomorrow, my church will be in repentance and seeking to transform our lives and the structures of our own church so that this will not happen again on our watch. I encourage you to reinstate the language of this amendment. I encourage you to create this committee as a standalone committee so that Portage County can be a more inclusive, safe, and welcoming community for all backgrounds to live and to thrive. Thank you.
Katrina Shanklin.
All right. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to address you all tonight. I live in Stevens Point, and I also attended the Exec Ops Committee virtually a couple weeks ago. Thank you so much, first of all, to Supervisor Mua and Supervisor Johnson for spearheading this initiative. I know they've been working on this for almost 2 years. I believe they started officially in October 2018, but possibly even sooner. Thank you also to Supervisor Morassi for not only being a public face for this, but for pushing it as well. I think the three of them demonstrate quite clearly that representation matters. Think about what the county board used to look like just a few years ago. Now look at it. Would this have even come before the committee and onto the county board without folks pushing for those who live on the margins, without folks pushing for diverse and inclusive representation in government, and more importantly, for belonging for every single person in our community and state? So I think I'm excited by the concept of the Diversity Inclusiveness Committee, but I also think that process matters. I think first and foremost, you need to restore that language because, as Jesse Haney so eloquently said, it was benign and it was factual. And secondly, and most importantly, I think who you appoint matters. If this is a committee that's made to check a box off the, well, we support diversity and inclusion because we have a committee, but it doesn't actually have power, then I think it's pointless. Who you appoint matters. Who is chosen to serve on this committee matters, and how you listen to this committee matters. When you're talking about groundwater and equity, you need to listen to this committee. When you talk about the criminal justice system and the size of our jail population, you need to listen to this committee. When you talk about COVID-19 and the disparities and who's diagnosed and who dies, you need to listen to this committee. And when you talk about representation in government and who should be voted as to chair of which committee, you need to listen to this committee too, because who holds power in our seats of government matters as well. So I think this would be a powerful statement from all of you tonight. If you're able to, hopefully unanimously approve this committee and then find voices from our most marginalized members of the community and work together to make government more accessible, inclusive, and representative for everyone, it wouldn't just be a great day or a great month or a great year for Portage County. It would represent, I think, a new era of Portage County being not only more inclusive, but more thoughtful about who gets to sit in the seat of government, who gets to make their voice heard, and who listens, and to whom do you listen? So with that, again, thank you all so much for putting in the work to make this possible. Thanks for taking it up tonight, and I look forward to the vote.
Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing me, and thank you for all those who spoke. I appreciate it, and thank you to all the supervisors for respectfully taking the time and listening. I would like to amend the resolution as it was presented to include these words, whereas these gaps mean that discrimination and exclusion, both explicit and in implicit ways, occur with some discrimination resulting in violence and intimidation by members of our community, colon or semicolon and comma. I'm just going to give a couple of examples of fact. Probably one of the most recent is a 57-year-old man was arrested after verbally accosting and nearly physically accosting a young Hmong gentleman while he grocery shopped. That happened in our community, and it happened just a couple of weeks ago, in fact. Then, of course, we all remember the terrible, terrible event in Junction City when Mr. Kaminsky decided he was going to fire shots at his Hmong neighbor, Ms. Mua. 'Mua. 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 December 2019, the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point newspaper, The Pointer, produced an editorial by a young man named Cameron Seski, A Tale of Two Campuses, and he tells about a time being downtown with friends where he, of mixed race, was called the N-word and verbally assaulted. Then a young man named Alexander Choi, of Asian descent, was working downtown on the demolition of the Fox. Saturday morning, he's going in by himself. Soon, law enforcement shows up and pointing pistols at him, or guns at him. Ask him to come out, grab him by the collar. He tried to tell them he worked there. He tried to show his ID. He was terribly, terribly upset by this entire event. Of course, since then, there's been apologies. But these are the kind of things that cause trauma to not only individuals, but to communities. And just because we're white doesn't mean the trauma doesn't occur to us too. Because when our neighbors, our friends, our family, our members of marginalized groups live with that trauma, it makes our community less. So I would like to have those words reintroduced, because it is not opinion. It is unfortunately a fact. And I'm hoping by the creation of this committee, we can change those facts, change the trauma, and change our community. Thank you.
Just to speak.
And if the clerk needs the exact language, I can email that to her.
Supervisor Johnson, it's exactly the same as it was before?
Yes, sir.
Okay, she has it then.
Thank you.
I have a motion and a second by Supervisor Dubek. Discussion on the amendment. Supervisor.
Mr. Chairman.
That's Stan.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
Supervisor Moore had her hand up.
Yep, Supervisor Moore.
Thank you for noticing me. Yeah, I just wanted to speak out in support of the amendment. I think some of us actually have to live that everyday trauma. And before being elected and after being elected, I've always been the person that many people would turn to report incidences or to process what just happened to them. And so I get to hear this every day from our folks. And I can tell you, I've heard just this year since COVID, I've heard about folks who've gotten their homes egged. I've had people in the last 2 weeks call me to safety plan because they've been verbally attacked for being a person of color, predominantly being Black in our community, and to have to sit there and safety plan with them because they don't trust our systems. And for me to ignorantly be like, well, would you like us to contact law enforcement? So it's also real that I have to see this every day. So it is not an opinion, it is fact. But it's fact that our county or many communities don't even have statistics on. And why a committee like this is so important. We actually should be collecting statistics on this. And as a way to measure how far a community is gone. And we can start now. So I'd really like to support that amendment. So, thank you.
Supervisor Moresi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Moresi.
Thank you. I really think that Ms. Haney had a really important question when she asked you and the vice chairs to explain why you believe that that was an opinion. I think it would just give us good dialogue to understand your point of view and perspective. And if you're willing to answer those questions, I think we could understand further. And because the experience that we're hearing about right now surely suggests otherwise.
And I will answer, and the other two can respond for themselves. I only speak for myself. I've had other resolutions up here. We've been criticized for having emotion in them and not having things that are factual. I was trying to be consistent, was where I was going with it. And Supervisor Johnson knows me very well. She knows that I run on fact, and she supplied those to me tonight. So I want to thank her for that, because I always look for, the way my mind works, tangible things, measurable things. And I am working to try and be more open to those things. But for her to give me some examples makes a difference. And I appreciate them being local examples, because that's what we are, is we're the Portage County Board. We deal with things here locally. So those are my reasons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really do appreciate you looking at this and responding. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other comments? Supervisor Dodge.
I guess I would give an explanation of why I supported removing of that particular whereas. To me, this is a group that should come forward, speaking for minorities in this community. It is not to inflame the discussion. It is to build community amongst all of us, whether you're conservative, liberal, black, white, purple. It really shouldn't make any difference. But I guess I see a different role for this committee. I would have suggested instead the previous whereas addressed gaps in the system. Significant gaps remain. So my preference would have been the whereas would address the gaps as being an objective of this committee and bringing those gaps forward for discussion and action, not to automatically condemn all of the gaps as being discriminatory and provoking violence. So that was my reason for voting to remove that whereas.
Any other discussion? Any other discussion? I thought somebody else had their hand up. Supervisor Neville.
Well, I just had a question. Are there more public comments? I mean, that was it? Well, I thought we had more people sign up. Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Moore.
Yeah, thank you for answering those questions. I just also wanted to say to everyone, yeah, this committee can be one that takes us forward, right? But in order for us to move forward, and in order for us to build, and in order for us to bring community together, we actually have to acknowledge harm that has been caused in our community. We also have to acknowledge and recognize the different forms of violence, systemic violence, or systemic and institutionalized biases that have led to violence in our communities. So is there no way for this to like start a fire or anything? I think from us acknowledging it and putting it in language says we see it, we acknowledge the issue, and we're going to move forward, and we can move forward by and building off to be better. And so that's really why I really want this language back in the resolution.
Supervisor Dodge.
I had the clerk look up the resolutions from Marathon County for my information. It was very general action and words creating their committee. And judging from the minutes of their meetings, they have been very successful in working within the community to build understanding. So I understand that there is a reaction of anger, etc. But it seems to me that we need to kind of tamp that down and work better with the individuals in the community that are seen as the problem, I guess.
Anybody else? Supervisor Ande.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to address this from 2 points of view. One, as a student of history, where in fact in this community, as many as 20 years ago, we had Black people from Nigeria, their legs broken outside of a current place and tavern, and very discriminatory in nature. Native Americans treated the same way at UWSP. These were not opinions, these were facts. That's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is that I'm a naturalized citizen. I'm honored to work here and trusted here and be elected, and that gives you the opportunity. I also happen to be white. If I keep my mouth shut, nobody would know any difference. But as soon as I open my mouth and they hear the accent, you'll find out that when I first came to the United States, my brother and I slept in shifts to make sure that our home was not egged. And other comments that you received for the pronunciation of your words because you were not perfect in English, or other type of actions that have a lifetime impact. So I think this committee is extremely important and needed, should stand alone. And that amendment that has been proposed should be included. Thank you for your time.
Supervisor Johnson, you had a comment again?
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. I just want to put some context. Marathon County began its diversity committee, I believe, in the 90s. So it's been a while. So we're a little bit behind where they are. And yes, Supervisor Dodge, they have done some wonderful things. Much of it under the assistance of my mentor, Brad Carter. So just to put some context to that. Thank you.
Supervisor Moore?
Sorry, it would be my last comment in support of this amendment. And I really should have spoke up and really said, before I give my last comment, I want to wish everybody a happy June 10th. Juneteenth, Freedom Day, that Black folks have declared as the end of slavery. Also, Happy Pride Month. These are different things that the Marathon County Diversity Committee hasn't been able to celebrate in their community. And I was actually with Supervisor Yiling Xiong, who is the chair of their diversity committee. I was with him over the weekend, and we had a good conversation about the different things and what it looked like to have marginalized communities chair and lead a committee like this. And we talked about some of the languages that would have to change. And he did mention he wished that they could be more intentional in laying and listing things out. But he did also say like he's learned a lot from organizers in our community as to how to make that happen. And so I just want to, yeah, again, it was created in the 1990s. A lot has changed. And learning from what they've done wrong and what they've done right and their lessons learned, we're going to take a lot of that back and we can build a better committee.
Anybody else? Oh, Mildred Neville?
No, we're voting on bringing this back, right?
No, we have an amendment that's on the floor right now.
That's what I mean, the amendment to bring the whereas back in.
Yes, yes. The
No, I have
amendment
a
is
correction to a different whereas. So that's not this one.
okay. Supervisor Splinter.
Before we vote, could you reread the amendment that we're voting on? We've got a lot of chatter in between, and I just want to make sure I'm clear on what's going on.
Last executive ops agenda.
Hold on a second.
I've got a written copy. Thank you.
You got it?
Got it.
Anybody else? Okay, we're voting on the amendment only to reinstate the whereas Again, this is not on the committee. This is just on the language in the resolution to create the committee. So with that, we have a motion and a second. The clerk will call the roll.
Charlie Gussel.
Yes.
Yes?
I don't know how to vote on this one.
Well, you got to pick one.
You can abstain.
Charlie got to pick one.
Or you can abstain.
Or you can
Do
abstain.
you want to abstain?
You have a yes, no, or abstain, Charlie.
I'll say no.
No. Okay. Dave Medine.
Aye.
Don Jankowski.
Aye.
Joan Hano.
Aye.
Dave Laddick.
Aye.
Mildred Neville.
Aye.
Bob Gifford.
Aye.
Mike Splinter.
Aye, I'm sorry.
Aye. Okay. Chris Dubek.
Aye.
Dennis Robbie. Dennis Robbie.
Aye.
Stan Pataki.
Aye.
Is that an aye?
Abstain.
Okay. And Tom Anday.
Aye.
Jerry Zastro.
Aye.
You said aye? Okay. All right. Julie Morrow.
Aye.
Chai Mua.
Aye.
Okay. Al Haga.
No.
Matt Chakowski.
Aye.
Vinnie Moresi.
Aye.
Larry Rakowski.
Aye.
Scott Zoik.
Aye.
Melissa Johnson.
Aye.
And Jeannie Dodge.
Aye.
Thanks to none.
So we have 3 excused, 2 against, and 24 amendment passed.
Now back to the original resolution as amended. Any other discussion? Supervisor Gifford.
Yeah, I can wrap this up in 3 minutes. I just wrote down some remarks that I had today. And you're a data kind of information guy, Al, you might appreciate this. When we consider the ordinance we're looking at, we should look at both the demographic data, the objective stuff, and the subjective stuff, which is what young people are looking for in a community. They're the ones we want to attract and keep, so I am told. If you look at Dale Knapp's work for Forward Analytics, and here we have another one tonight, it's a branch of Wisconsin Counties Association, so we should pay attention. These reports stood out to me in support of this committee. The rural challenge, depopulation, and its economic consequence, talking about people leaving our rural counties. The birth dearth, falling fertility rates, fewer babies. And the report falling behind, migration changes in state workforce, talking about people migrating out. These 3 reports show that our north central Wisconsin counties are aging out in population. The workforce is not being replaced enough by young workers coming in, and even the rate of births by younger families is falling behind. So that's the objective stuff. But on the subjective side, Dale's report on millennials and their attitude toward our north central counties will be important going forward. And this relates to the committee that we're forming. His report, Millennial Wisconsin, is Wisconsin attractive to this generation? If you spend time, as I do, with 2 younger generations of people on campus, both in the activist organization, but also just socializing, hanging out as peers, you'll discover these 2 generations, Gen Zero, as it's called, and the millennial generation, really value diversity and inclusiveness. If they're looking for a community to settle in, These values of diversity and inclusiveness play an important part for them. And in addition, many of the younger workers we want to attract are from minority peoples, the Black community, Asian community, Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Chile, etc. So for the both objective demographic reasons and the subjective quality of life issues, we should create this committee with the draft ordinance language that's included in our packet. Thank you.
Anybody else? Supervisor Neville.
Two things. One is the third, whereas I think the word should be businesses, plural.
Businesses. Could go either way. And are you making a motion to amend? I could read either way, I guess.
Well, I think typically when you say a number of, it's a plural word that follows.
Is that an amendment?
Yes, I'd like to make it as an amendment.
Okay. Seconded by Moresi. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Did she have any more?
Do you have any
Do
more?
you have any more?
Just the one?
No, that's it. I have a question, but that was it for that.
On the amendment, if there's no other discussion, all those in favor with aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? Amendment carries. Back to the original.
Okay, so I had the question, when is the makeup of this committee determined?
It's on the next executive ops for discussion.
Okay, thank you.
It's on the agenda. Any other discussion? Supervisor Moresi.
I'll make it very quick since this is pretty much word for word from the Executive Operations Committee. But I want to look at this from a different perspective. We had a lot of heartfelt, data-driven testimonials here today. I also would like to say that the correspondence for the Executive Operations Committee included 32 letters. Of those 32 letters, that was a total of 44 pages of testimonial. Since that time, I have received an additional 10 letters. Those are the ones that came in late. They did not make the deadline for correspondence. I wish that the county board could have gotten that correspondence as well of the 32 letters, because most of them were just as eloquent as what you heard spoken today by the 4 people who made comments today. Filled with lots of information, lots of data, and lots of experiences that you wouldn't normally hear about here in Portage County. So what I had said at the Executive Ops Committee was looking at this kind of from the business perspective. And here's a couple of quotes just to show you why inclusive practices and diversity are very important to run your organization, your business. And that's what we are. We're running an organization that's doing a lot of business for a lot of people, 70,000. So the board is a setting example that is important. The board is not both diverse and inclusive. It lacks credibility with management, and likely as well with investors, customers, employees, and other stakeholders. It's a quote from a Fortune 500 industrial products manufacturer. It all starts at the board to set the tone for inclusion as a priority for both internally and externally. That's a governance committee chair for Motorola Solutions. To truly embody and govern inclusion, the board should reflect the diversity of the organization's base, its composition. It should create an inclusive culture within the boardroom itself and integrate inclusive thinking behaviors into all ways that the board operates. That's from the CEO of Workforce Excellence. So what I said at the last meeting is we need to assume that our shareholders are our constituents. They invest a lot of money in the taxes they give us, and they definitely expect a return on investment. If we don't provide results, they can vote us off the board. They can find new chairs and they can start over. The shareholders, the stakeholders, the constituents are demanding that we invest our time, money, and energy into people, not products, not buildings, not profits, but people, because they know the best return on investment is spent on lifting others up. The best return on investment is taking care of our neighbor. The best return on investment is making sure our children get their needs met. That has not been happening in our country for a very, very long time, and we have the time. We've refused to have these tough conversations, and I think now the county board is finally acknowledging that we need to have some of those conversations, and we need to stand up for people who are the have-nots and lift them up. We need to have these conversations about systemic bias, racism, and oppression. We need to bring all the voices to the table. I'm kind of paraphrasing here, I'm sorry. We need to create this committee so that the people know we're actively trying to make Portage County a safer place and for them to live and thrive. So our shareholders, they ask about diversity and inclusion because they know it adds a long-term investment or long-term shareholder value. And that's what they're asking for. They see huge value in doing the work of doing anti-racism work. They see huge value in bringing all people to the table. They want us to build something that will stand the test of time. Inclusion will challenge old assumptions, bring fresh ideas, and create stability within our community. And that's our charge as a governing body, to enhance the quality of life for all its residents by providing fiscally responsible services that enable our citizens to build productive communities, families, and lives. Our constituents are entitled to their fair share of resources and services we provide in actual representation. So I really believe that this committee is incredibly important for us to support. I hope we can have a unanimous decision here today. I think it'll show the community that we're ready to take the steps necessary to make our community whole again and move forward with some action. Thank you.
If there's no other discussion, we have Supervisor Moore.
Yeah. Okay. Promise this will be my last comment. I'm urging everyone to vote for this committee today. I think a lot of the comments we've talked about, or the comments, have really focused on things that have happened, but I want us to really look at the bigger picture of how beautiful our community is, right? And I say this at all the committee meetings. I could live anywhere else, but I chose Portage County. I know that as a person of color, regardless where I go, I will still experience biases and racism and all of that. This committee is not just about racism. This committee is also, there are other forms of, there are other community members that are also marginalized in our communities, and to also uplift those communities as well. But it's a way for us to really make ourselves better. Like since moving up here since 2005, I brought my whole family here. I advertised, brought my brothers to come open businesses, my sister-in-laws to open businesses here in the area, bringing young folks, to my family members, to come to college here and to stay here. And because we are actually leading in a lot of ways. And we're a great community and we can make it better. And this is one way we're doing this. I also want to say, like, since the talk of Portage County creating this committee, I've had so many other communities reach out and say, we want to do something similar. We want to look like Portage County. And so I just want to tell you, like, let's vote, like, let's unanimously vote on this tonight. We are leading, and folks are watching how we do things and following our lead. And here's our chance to really do right for our community. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Mr. Chair, is Astro here?
Supervisor Astro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to comment that I think we've had some very good dialect today. The conversation was great. I think some exceptionally good points have been brought up, and I commend the whole board for having good conversation. Thank you.
Anybody else from home? Nope. All right, we have a resolution on the floor as amended. If there's no other discussion, I will just call it. All those in favor with aye? Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion's unanimous, motion carries. Number 2, Marathon County, Portage County Regional Forensic Science Center Partnership. Motion by Supervisor Jankowski, seconded by Supervisor Ande. Discussion. This has no money tied to it. This is just a way of saying that we are entering into furthering the discussion with Marathon County about the possibilities of us having a joint forensic lab and taking a look at the business plan moving forward. So right now, we don't have a plan for the future for our morgue. We're in a location, but we don't know how long, we don't have any control over that. This is a situation where we're control of our future. So we need to look at this to look at and make sure that we're protected down the road and we have a place to be. So any other discussion from anybody? Anybody at home? No. All those in favor with aye? Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Number 3, authorizing a contract amendment for solid waste department fiscal year 2021 budget relating to the processing of member municipal recycling and operation of the Portage County materials and recovery facilities. Motion by Supervisor Medine, seconded by Supervisor Moresi. Any discussion? Supervisor Medine.
I'd like to give just a little bit of context on this as a solid waste member of the board.
Thank you.
This contract is $70 a ton, about three quarters of what it costs to process recyclables. It costs us about $100 a ton to recycle. We are selling now at about $60 a ton, okay? So we're losing $40 a ton. We used to sell it for about $100 a ton and we made out even. We're an enterprise fund, so we should try to come out even. We're now coming out about $150,000 behind. Recycling has bottomed out. It looks like it's getting a little bit better. But the decision that the solid waste board has to make, and I wanted to present this to you now so you know that you not to be surprised if you hear some of the discussions that we're having. The last couple of years, we've had to subsidize the recycling through the garbage tipping fees, and we put on about $10 or so of a $55 a ton cost. It looks like we would have to increase the tipping fee another $5 this year in order to come out even. And we're looking now for the first time ever of maybe having a fee on recycling to come up with that $150,000 shortfall. That would be about $35 a ton for the municipalities and $40 a ton for businesses. I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that. So it's becoming more common in the state to actually charge for recycling because it's somewhat of a loser at this particular time. One of the questions that I had asked, will that be a deterrent to recycling if we start to charge for recycling? In other words, will people not recycle because it looks like it's a costly operation? And because it's a very successful program in many other ways in this county, it would not be a deterrent if we did start to charge for the recycling. So it looks like the solid waste board may be making up this shortfall of $150,000 through requesting that there be a recycling fee. I just wanted to give you some context on that. And it looks like for the near future, until recycling comes back, if it ever does. It looks like it would be the very best way to do it rather than penalizing the garbage tipping fee and have it be applied directly to the recycling. Thank you.
One thing that, in my years on solid waste too, was that if your guys are talking about an increase or a tipping fee increase to be moving forward with that so that the smaller municipalities have enough time. Everybody's talking about budgets. We had one a number of years ago that came a little late, and the smaller municipalities can't absorb that kind of a bump. So I would urge you guys to be moving along with that so that they have enough notice. And I talked before about small increases, so there's not the big peaks and valleys in the tipping fees as well. And the recycling was something we always talked about because it seems like we get very good participation in the recycling in this area, and you wouldn't want to turn that on and off. It confuses people. So Supervisor Moresi.
Just to add on to Supervisor Medin's comment, the reason why if we added a tipping fee for recycling, it wouldn't be a deterrent is because it's still cheaper to recycle than it would be to throw it in the trash. So, and it is successful. People are doing it. We've kind of ingrained it in the culture since I was a child. So I think it could be a good way to make up some of that cost. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Anybody from home? Oh. All right. We have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor with aye? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm abstaining. I would like the record to show that. Supervisor Johnson?
Supervisor Johnson's abstention.
Yep.
Duly noted. Number 4, approving and authorizing Portage County Solid Waste to execute an amended agreement with Michelson and Sons Trucking to operate the Portage County Transfer Facility and transport solid waste to the licensed landfill for years 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. Motion by Supervisor Laddick, seconded by Supervisor Moresi. Discussion. Supervisor Laddick.
I did a little investigation on this, and this resolution is warranted. When it comes to bidding, I'm a little bit versed in that, and I was kind of questioning why this happened. Evidently, they had it 3 years ago. They had amendment on the first contract that included that 17-ton minimum. When they rebid it, that was missed, not intentionally. And so they've been kind of living with this for last year, but it really hasn't been a factor. Well, last year they average everything by the month, and it's always been over 17-ton loads. So it's not an individual loads, it's over the total month. So this adjustment is definitely warranted because it was missed in the 2019 bid, the way the proposal was written by a different purchasing manager.
And I believe they've been doing it for a long time, and I think they do a pretty good job of it, so.
They've been pretty, I mean, for what they're charging, they're very reasonable.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
Any other discussion? All those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Supervisor Johnson?
Yes, I shall abstain from this one as well. Thank you.
Amendment passes. Motion to adjourn. Motion by Supervisor Rakowski, seconded by Supervisor Jankowski. All those in favor with aye? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.